Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Cash and Sport. Thank you so much for joining me again today. Sanan is not here, but I'm flying solo. Today we're going to take a look at two very interesting topics. The one is WADA and its stance on marijuana and how they're going to review that. And the second one is rugby in America and how it's growing, and the business of those two things, and why they're important in the grand scheme of things and why they came up in the news the past week. But before we get into it, let's take a look at the world sporting highlights over the past week. The Springboks, man, it's not looking good. Another loss, this time to Australia. So 2 out of 2 faced the All Blacks this weekend, and the All Blacks have just been on fire. And you could argue that they haven't really been playing their top game of rugby. So it's going to be a hard day at the office. Let's hope that the Springboks, put on a respectable performance. The second is Banyana. Shout out to them, winning the inaugural Aisha Buhari Cup today against Nigeria, beating them 4-2. They'd won the previous game against Ghana. It was a friendly tournament where they only played 2 games, but they needed to either win or draw the last game to win the tournament, which they did. So 2 out of 2 for them. They are on an incredible run. 10 out of 10 games won. I think they've scored 36 goals in that time and only conceded 5. It's just incredible what Desiree Ellis is doing, and big shout out to Banyana. My team, Man United, scraped through against West Ham. A couple of dubious penalty calls, but we scraped through. Sanani's team got a bit of a royal hiding from Royal AM, 4-1. But her other team in England, Chelsea, won. Amazing, playing crazy good football is Thomas Tuchel and his boys. And lastly, I guess, what can we say? The Proteas, World Cricket, England, and the cancellation of the tour in New Zealand, COVID, and the way that these teams are handling themselves is very interesting. England just deciding to. England being angry at cancelled tours, New Zealand on the eve, literally on the day of their match, cancelling that match, citing security concerns. Yeah, world sport is going through a lot right now. And it's going to be very interesting to see how it goes. But let's get into topic number 1. What is going on with WADA, World Anti-Doping Agency, and marijuana? So, what's going on with WADA and marijuana? So we all know that Sha'Carri Richardson, the American sprinter, was barred from competing at the Olympics. She tested positive for having taken marijuana. She admitted as such. She took marijuana just before the, I think it was the US trials. She did really well in that, but then her sample came back positive. So therefore she was barred or banned for a month. She couldn't compete at the Olympics. As a result of that, the US sporting committee decided to launch an appeal and say, hey guys, could you allow her to run, etc., etc. They said, WADA came back and said, guys, there's a whole procedure of how you go about doing this. Marijuana has been on our banned substance list for a very long time, and these are the reasons, etc., etc. So what are those reasons? Basically, for a substance to qualify as a banned substance, it must meet 3 specific criteria. The drug must meet 2 of 3 specific criteria. The drug must enhance performance, create a health risk, or go against the spirit of the sport. Now, the first one, does marijuana enhance performance? The short answer is no, it doesn't. It doesn't make you go faster. It doesn't make you get stronger. What athletes do use it for is for pain management and sleep. Does sleep help in recovery? Yes. But I guess you could just sleep normally like a normal person, or sleep 8 hours, 9 hours, etc., and you'll get the same benefit without the marijuana. And even that is kind of up in the air scientifically as to whether it does make you sleep much better. Pain management, is it better for you to run through pain because you've got marijuana in your system? The answer would probably be no, because you'd want to be fully recovered. That pain is going to inhibit you regardless. So whether you're using marijuana for pain management or not, it's not going to make you run faster or jump higher or throw further. So probably the answer there would be no. Does it create a health risk? It's been proven for a long time that people die from many other things. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone dying from a marijuana overdose, or that type of thing. So does it create a health risk fundamentally for the athlete? No, generally not. And then, is it in the good spirit of the sport? We all know about the war on drugs and how marijuana was seen as a taboo drug, et cetera, as a drug. The reasons it kind of, in my opinion, it just doesn't fall within the prescripts of those three things. So therefore, WADA have decided that they are going to review marijuana's position on the banned substance list. They put out a statement saying, following the receipt of requests from a number of stakeholders, the executive committee endorsed the decision of the list expert advisory group to initiate a 2022 specific review of the status of cannabis. Essentially, they're going to review whether it should stay on the banned substance list and potentially remove it. Of course, it's too late for Sha'Carri Richardson, but I mean, they wouldn't be the first body to kind of remove marijuana as a banned substance. Major League Baseball removed marijuana from its banned substance list in 2019. The NBA suspended its use of random testing for marijuana because, again, it doesn't really help athletes when anything, probably makes them play worse. The NFL changed its penalty for positive marijuana results to a fine rather than a suspension. And in January 2021, the UFC stated that testing positive for cannabis would no longer be considered a violation of organization's anti-doping policy. So it's progressive. It doesn't really help you with anything in terms of your performance. So why should it be there? And I think it's a good thing. On to topic 2, USA Rugby and the growth of USA Rugby. This, for me, is a very interesting one. This came up because a rugby player that we had at the Lions, Dan Creel, who's actually the twin brother of Jesse Creel, has moved to the USA. Very interesting decision. He's only 27. He's played at the Bulls. He started there as a junior. So very interesting decision. Why would he move? And why the USA? First and foremost, we have a whole bunch of rugby players going to play everywhere. Japan, France, England, you name it. The USA, not so much. But Tendai Mtawarira, at the end of his career, basically had won the World Cup with the Springboks in 2019, decided to leave the Sharks and go and play at DC Old Glory in America. It's called Major League Rugby. Rugby isn't completely unfamiliar with them. It's not been a sport that's been hugely popular. It's less popular than baseball and ice hockey and basketball, etc., etc. But it is now the fastest growing sport in the US. And their numbers have exploded. Over the last 10 years, it came from 30,000 registered players to over 110,000 registered players. You look at the successes that US Rugby has seen on the Rugby 7 circuit with players like Perry Baker, Colin Isles, and so on and so on. They've been doing really, really well. They don't just have an average team anymore. In the sevens, they've got an excellent team, really, really excellent team. And they're getting better. So what is with the situation of South Africans going over, to the US and playing? Well, the US, much like Japan, if we take Japan as an example, Japan intentionally started bringing in athletes to bolster their league and to get their players playing at a higher level. You started seeing players from all over the place starting to go to Japan and earning big money. The reason for that is because they knew they were going to host the World Cup, and they hosted it in Japan. There was that famous victory over the Springboks. You've seen Japanese rugby just go from strength to strength. They've beaten some of the world's best. And the US is basically trying to replicate that. So what they've done in that respect is that they've been accepted as a bidder for the Rugby World Cup in 2027, 2029, and 2031. It kind of makes sense also now that they're starting to pour money into the game and trying to start attracting rugby players. And it wouldn't be a surprise to me if we start seeing more rugby players going over to the US. The only issue, though, would be that there are salary caps in the US. So the average minimum salary in the US for players, 25,000 Rand or $25,000, which equates to about 30,000 Rand a month. And the highest salary would be about $45,000. Now, that's equates to about $60,000, 60,000 Rand a month. Now, does that attract a player who's playing in provincial rugby, perhaps can't get into the Springbok setup, and perhaps can't get into one of the big, clubs in Europe, knowing the fact that there's a United Rugby Championship and the best of the best players are going to be going into those teams? It would probably get more difficult for players to get into those teams anyway. Why not go play in the States? The league is probably easier to play in. You're earning in dollars, so financially, if the Rand weakens, you're earning more. You're making more money. Beyond that as well, there's an opportunity maybe to even play for the US. In the US's 2019 team, they had 3 South Africans in the team. The coach is Gary Gold, who used to be a director of rugby at the Lions. Pedri Vandenberg is a coach of one of the Major League Rugby teams. So it makes sense for the US to be putting money into it and be trying to attract the best of the best players. Matt Ghetto plays in the US. And those best of the best players would hopefully increase the level of their 15s rugby program, which isn't as good as their 7th rugby program. So they're looking to try and see if they can replicate the success that Japan has seen and make a really good impression on world rugby. Plus, let's be honest, there's a lot of very good American football players who probably wouldn't get into a big football team, but have the physique and the athleticism required to play the sport. All they would need to do is learn the ropes. Take a look at Colin Isles as an example in the 7s format. He started off as a sprinter and a football player, knew nothing about rugby. All of a sudden, because he's quick and he has the physiology, he's now picked up rugby and he's now a star on the 7th circuit. The problem would be developmental wise. They don't have a good development program in that kids don't start playing rugby from when they're 5-10 years old. They start playing American football. If they can start doing that and start building up a good base because rugby is not just a sport that you can just pick up and in 7 months' time be playing on, in 15s. It takes a while for you to hone the skills and the natural talent and flair that you see in sort of New Zealand rugby or Springbok rugby, where we have, the Curry Cup or the Craven Week system, etc., etc. They don't have that in the US. And unless they start doing that and start developing kids from younger, they might have a problem. But the fundamentals that they learn in American football in terms of running and carrying the ball, etc., might bode well for them in terms of making the transition easier for kids from American football to rugby. And I think it's a really smart play. It's a big country, lots of potential talent. And yeah, I definitely think that it's one to look out for, especially with athletes here who aren't able to get contracts in Europe, in Japan, in France, etc., and are looking for an exit from South African rugby and potentially earning some big money elsewhere. The US could definitely be an option. But yeah, that's it for today's video. If you like this type of content, if you have a request for us to cover, drop a comment in the comments below. Hit the like button, hit the follow button, hit the subscribe button, share the content to your friends. We appreciate all the feedback. Thank you to Cyrus Rogers last week with the comment about football and the way that that's happening. We we'll definitely have Cyrus on the show very soon to talk about the business of basketball, especially as that starts hotting up. But yeah, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.